for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride!
More pride! More pride! More pride!
Respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Members of the gallery, please note this urban planning meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted Councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. I'd like now to do some introductions of councillors and officers in attendance for tonight's meeting. Councillors in attendance tonight are Councillor Natalie Abood, Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Anna Olivia Carly-Hannon, Councillor Ali Afanli. Officers in attendance with us tonight are Acting Group Manager of City Development, Narelle Jennings, Planning Coordinator Robert Shatford, Principal Urban Planner Vita Galante, Principal Urban Planner Andy Wilson, Unit Manager of Governance Sally Curran, Governance Officer Saskia Hunter. We're now moving on to apologies, and I note that we have an apology from Councillor Tapanos because he's on a leave of absence. Are there any other apologies tonight? No? Would anyone like to move that apology? Yep, Councillor Afanli, seconded by Mayor Davidson. Any comment on that? So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. We're now moving on to the adoption of the minutes. Could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of June 2017? Councillor Kavanagh, seconded by Councillor Riley. Are there any comments or discussion on the minutes? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We now move on to declaration of interest and or conflicts of interest, and there's a number of matters that councillors would like to declare conflicts on tonight. So I might just ask the relevant councillors to state the nature of their conflict. Councillor Riley?
Yes, I have a conflict on the 269 or DED 6417, as I'm a... What's the term? I have a conflicting duty as I'm a member of the series board, and I'm taking that conflict as a conflict of duty. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood?
Yes, I'm also a series board member, but I've been, just for clarification, stepping out of those conversations regarding DED 6417, so I'm not a conflict there, but I am a conflict on DED 6517 and 6617 by close association.
Thank you. And I too would like to declare a conflict of interest on 269 Stewart Street, Brunswick East, as that will affect my residential amenity as I live in the neighbourhood. So I will be handing over the chair to Mayor Davidson for that item. Any other conflicts to declare or interest to declare? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the substantive part of the agenda. I wish to give everyone an outline of how the Urban Planning Committee will run this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the report and officers' recommendations. I will then give any objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you're making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the application. Please try not to repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on the relevant issues and points that have not been previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, we please ask that you inform the committee why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns. Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than the matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note there's a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. So we're now moving on to the presentation of officer reports, and our first report is DCS 3917, proposed land swap with Darryl Ullum College of Victoria. Councillor Kavanagh?
Could I move the officer recommendation on page 3, please?
Certainly, and is there a second to Councillor Riley? Councillor Kavanagh, do you wish to speak to this item?
Just briefly. First of all, this requires a process, and this is getting towards the end of this process. It was actually initiated originally by former councillor Rob Thompson, so I congratulate him on that. I also thank the submitter for making a submission. In fact, on this occasion, the one submitter is a submitter in support of the land swap, so I thank the submitter for taking the time to place that on record. And we cannot make any decision tonight, but we're moving towards making a decision at a full council.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Riley, do you wish to add anything further? Are there any speakers for or against or questions on this item? No? If with no further debate, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Now, before moving on to the next item, I'll like a motion for a temporary chairperson, which is Mayor Davidson. Is there a... Councillor Afanli moved that and Councillor Kavanagh seconded. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried, and I'll hand over to Mayor Davidson.
Okay, we'll now move on to DED 6417 269 Stewart Street, Brunswick East, planning permit application MPS 2016-734. And if there's an objector who would like to speak, sorry, I'll hand over to the officer first, who will outline the application.
Thank you, Mayor Davidson. So this is a matter at 269 Stewart Street. It's before the Urban Planning Committee, which is seeking consent for an agreement that has been reached following a series of VCAT compulsory conferences. The proposal is for a 6-storey building containing commercial and residential uses. As you can see on the screen, the site is a large site located east of Nicholson Street. It's zoned Commercial 1 zone, and the interfaces are Ceres Environment Park to the east, and it's otherwise surrounded by residential development. By way of a very brief background, the application was initially refused by council officers, and that was on grounds relating to neighbourhood character, a lack of commercial uses, insufficient landscaping, amenity impacts, and some internal amenity concerns. The application is currently before VCAT, and the applicant, council officers, and a number of objector parties have taken part in 3 compulsory conferences in order to reach a compromised outcome that all parties have agreed to. So the agreement is subject to council's consent. If the council does not consent, the matter will proceed to a hearing on the 7th of August. So at the first 2 compulsory conferences, the report, as contained in tonight's agenda, outlines the key agreements that were reached. And these were a reduction in the number of dwellings from 109 to 90, the replacement of home offices with commercial tenancies fronting Stewart Street, increased space for landscaping, particularly along the northern boundary, increased setbacks from the northern boundary at all levels, increased setbacks from the western boundary at all levels, and increased setbacks from the southern and eastern boundary at level 4. The agreement also allows for a potential future bicycle and pedestrian link on the eastern side of the building, should council wish to pursue one. Now, yesterday, a 3rd compulsory conference occurred as a result of additional parties lodging statements of grounds with VCAT following the circulation of amended plans. The outcome of this further compulsory conference was that an agreement to relocate the vehicle crossing from the western edge of the site to the eastern side, so it's adjacent to Ceres. This will also allow for the retention of a third mature tree within the front setback, and the effect of this change is shown in the sketch plan on the screen. So as a result of this further agreement, council officers are seeking to substitute the recommendation in tonight's agenda with a new recommendation. And essentially the new recommendation, which is shown on the two side screens, includes two new conditions regarding relocation of the accessway and retention of the tree, as per the sketch. It also makes a number of other minor changes to conditions which we've also agreed to at the compulsory conference. In summary, it's recommended that on the basis that all other parties to the appeal give consent, that council also consents to the agreement reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. Now I'll turn to an objector who would like to speak in relation to this application. Yes, please come forward.
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I'm wanting to focus the council's attention upon this site, particularly because it was a council site. This was the site of the Brunswick City Council Electricity Supply Department. The present building built there was built for and used until the abolition of the department by the Brunswick City Council Electricity Supply Department. So please, when you are considering this matter, please consider the history as well. The other issue I'd like to raise is that Stewart Street in this section from Nicholson Street to Ceres has very poor pedestrian access. Further along, next to the former Roman Catholic school, now Cretan Centre, there is no footpath. I believe that Stewart Street, this precinct as such, needs to have a strong, the council needs to strongly look at pedestrian access and general traffic flow through this area. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Is there a second objector who wishes to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I have to say it's quite enlightening that something which we initially objected to as residential, of course, is commercial. And once it's commercial, it has a huge number of residences, whereas if it had been residential, this debate wouldn't have gone on. So I guess that's a gap. But the thing I would like to endorse here is my name is Marie Presser and I live at 37 Kingfisher Gardens.
Thank you.
And my concern is that that street is so small and it's a bus route and the cars go round. And I know you did a count and it somehow doesn't quite hit the number. But the reality of the street is that it cannot support that number of cars coming out into it or the flow. It's just not safe. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Is there a third objector who wishes to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Jenny Wanigasakra and I'm one of the parties actually named. We have spent something like 23 hours in mediation trying to get a better outcome. Whilst it's not ideal, it's something that a number of residents who directly border it have made some peace with. We are dealing with the very real possibility we have a cruise ship in our backyard. It is 20 metres in height, so that is one thing that was not resolved during mediation. We have achieved a number of improvements in the driveway location because that impacted a number of residents directly across and next door because it was hard up on a boundary wall. That has been moved yesterday in mediation, and we've achieved a number of greater setbacks like Vita actually said, so it has gone a long way to improve it whilst it's not ideal. I think my comment is more against council not looking at this particular island site. It is a commercial zone 1. It was a business zone 5 before all the changes happened within the state planning changes. This really should have been looked at when the activity corridors were developed and some sort of development overlay put on it. We have a very high density pocket already within Stewart Street. There are 2 townhouse developments nearby and Ceres, and then very restricted neighbourhood residential behind it. The site actually slopes towards the neighbourhood residential, so we have an extra storey at the back for some reason. But yeah, I think council really dropped the ball on this during their assessments and could have offered some protection to the residents. So we're not actually having this discussion. But yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Anke Pfeiler and live on Stewart Street. And all I would like to do is to echo Jenny's comments on our disappointment in council in not putting a design development overlay on this site and in putting a commercial zone 1 zoning on this site.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Rob Duncan. I'm from number 10 Muggle Street in East Brunswick. I'm representing Ceres Incorporated in this matter, and I've been asked to clarify its position as an objector. The Ceres Environment Park is immediately east of the subject site within the public park and recreation zone. It shares a 70-metre boundary with and is the largest single neighbour of the site. Excuse me. In February, Ceres lodged an objection to the advertised proposals, citing 17 grounds of concern. Ceres has become a party to an agreement, the agreement that was described at the outset, detailing a package of adjustments to the advertised plans that's been reached through negotiations with the applicant in conjunction with a number of neighbouring residents. This package forms the proposed development before the committee tonight. Ceres stands by this agreement and will honour this if the committee endorses the modified proposal. I ask the committee to be mindful of the issues raised in Ceres objections, negotiations and the modifications that have been proposed to ameliorate some of the impacts of concern. It's acknowledged that the question before this committee tonight is different from those faced by the objector parties. The negotiating process focused on addressing individual impacts and interests, but was not charged with assessing the proposal against planning scheme provisions or council policy considerations. Last night, I briefed the Ceres board on the outcome of these negotiations. While accepting the negotiated agreement, disappointment was expressed that despite the negotiated refinements, the scale of the proposal remains disproportionate to its setting. A significant motivation for pursuing a negotiated outcome rather than face a full hearing is that as a not-for-profit organisation, Ceres is not in a position to engage legal and technical expertise of the calibre to match that of an applicant in the adversarial environment of a full VCAT hearing. Consequently, we ask that should the committee determine not to support this package, that it commit to vigorous defence of its decision with the aim of matching or exceeding the concessions that have been negotiated by the objector parties. Thank you.
Are there any further objectors? No. Is there a representative for the applicant?
My name's Panos Miltiadu. The business I represent is Lucent Capital. We're a young development business. We sat before you a couple of months ago and described our project at Nicholson Street in the context of sustainability and what we were trying to achieve. We're here to set a trend. We're not here as a one-off. We've done exactly the same thing again in this development. We are 7-star NABERS rated. We're not introducing any fossil fuels. We've got an electrical embedded network, again, that sources its energy from renewable sources. We've got one-bed apartments in this whole development. It's targeted at owner-occupiers. We've introduced the bike path in connection and conversation with Ceres and council. We've introduced a car charging station into our basement to try and promote sustainability in the context of transport and drivability. Productive gardens on 3 different levels. So in the context of landscaping, we've got a ground level, we've got a northern terrace, and we've got a rooftop terrace. So in the context of amenity by square meterage, I think it'd be hard to find a development that's of similar scale. The thing that's a little bit disappointing, obviously hearing the members speak, is that we've dedicated over 20 hours, or sorry, the objector speak, is we've dedicated over 20 hours to facilitating solutions. We've never pushed, we've never imposed ourselves, and at any stage under the guidance of VCAT with a member, people could have chosen not to sign and we could be in a different position. Good faith, I believe, has been shown by all. I really want to thank council in particular, Vida, who got dragged through that process with us. Really fantastic objectors who, to be completely honest, worked really hard and didn't negotiate in the context of what they weren't prepared to give up, and we did meet those requirements. From a numbers perspective, we had 55 objectors, and yesterday we had 57, and all are parties to this agreement. In the context of what we're looking to do, we want to be a good neighbour. We've retained all the trees, we've moved our entry point into the site, we've moved our setbacks well beyond rest code, and we are trying to produce a product that we can be very proud of and that has a sense of community. So when looking at this, one of the things that stuck out for me is that this was a decision in the control of, including ourselves, 58 groups. We're in control of this decision. We reached an agreement and we all signed it yesterday. It's before you now to endorse the 58 people that came together over 20 hours and 3 compulsory conferences to this point. If it doesn't succeed, then it obviously goes to VCAT, and if it goes to VCAT, then that decision's out of our hands. We will obviously protect our interests in that context, but I believe this is an outcome that's balanced everything that our objectors and council want, and gives us a really good landmark development that I think Ceres, as our biggest neighbour, will be proud of. I thank you for your time and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you leave, are there any questions from councillors for the applicant or the officer?
Naturally, you're espousing the virtues of the application, so I understand that. Can you explain to me why it's taken 3 modifications to this point? Why was this not the first one that was put forward? So in the context of the way we've gone through our process, we engage our consultants, including urban design consultants, traffic consultants and the like. We use their expertise to form what we believe is a development that the site can handle. So that's initially what was done. We took that into pre-app meetings and the like, from which we solidified our position, again using consultant bases to obviously lodge our application. We were surprised by the level of objection, and then subsequently, 3 compulsory conferences later, looked to scale back to get to an appropriate size in that context. Even the saving of the tree, that tree wasn't saved until yesterday's agreement, was it?
Well, the issue that we do have is that we've got a traffic report that indicates, this is our consultant's traffic report, that indicates that 2 crossovers, one at Ceres, one to our existing site, and a potential bike path causes what is a hotspot. So the conversation around the position of crossover, not precious to me, just so we're clear, whether it was on east or west, wasn't a concern in the context of we had a preference. We do acknowledge the tree is significant. We do acknowledge that it's obviously a best outcome, but we were working to a report by traffic. When we went through the process yesterday, during, again, the conference, another 6-hour process, we took the opportunity during that time, and the member allowed it, to contact traffic engineers and to work through possible barriers and solutions, to which we obviously ended up with a level of comfort. We still, for the record, have to substitute our plans and put that to, for advertising, so that people are now aware that it's subsequently changed. So we are very well aware of that process. But our traffic engineer yesterday, within the span of 2 hours, and it took a while admittedly, gave us some comfort that we could move it. So it wasn't about removing the trend for the sake of it. It was more a concern around, are we introducing an additional bottleneck that the traffic report or consultant couldn't support?
Thank you. Councillor Aboud.
Hi, panellists. Thanks for your presentation. My question is about accessibility. Until recently, I didn't really understand how complex accessibility issues are, and I have a friend who regularly points out to me stuff that I don't usually notice. But I did notice this, which is that 80% of the dwellings are not designed to be visitable by a person with limited mobility by providing a clear path of travel from the accessible entry to a living area and toilet suitable for people with limited mobility. And I was wondering, how is that the case, and what's your justification for that figure?
What we did, again, is we took our report to a DDA consultant. So, again, using a consultant, DDA consultant was tasked with saying what's an appropriate run length in terms of corridor length for a person with mobility or accessibility issues. The site is very long. That's one thing we've got to be very mindful of. So the accessibility from our entrance to the depth, let's call it the furthest depth of our development, was considered too onerous a journey. So by that, almost 50% of our apartments, just by that virtue, got excluded in the context of accessible based on travel distance. So what it did allow for, though, is 20% of our development obviously to be accessible. Just from a track record perspective, we've got 2 further developments where we have done over 6 individual changes for purchasers with disability, and it's something that we're more than happy, or from an accessibility perspective, to do. Our common area entrances facilitate that. Our lift access facilitates that. It's literally a widening of a door, and then obviously internal fit-out changes, but 20% of our apartments, which in this case is over 18, can handle.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any further questions from councillors? No. Is there a councillor who wishes to move a proposed motion? Councillor Martin.
I wish to move an alternative motion to what the officers have put forward tonight. And if I have a seconder, I'm happy to talk to it.
Councillor Bolton.
So I thank the residents, and I thank panels for coming tonight. I think one of the things that really shows in your presentations is your ability and your willingness to work with residents, and I really encourage all developers to have open, clear communication with all objectors and residents, and really work together to get good outcomes. I'm a really big proponent of that. In this situation, and a lot of the residents raised this, and this has been an issue for me, and I always put myself in the situation of, would I live next door to this? Would I think that this is fair for the people of the area? And for me, the thing that I can't get past is the fact that this site should have been, in our DDO, it should be limited at 4 stories. I think that the bulk and the size of this site, it's just not, thanks. I just don't think that that's fair to put that on the residents in the area. I really do. I love the things that the ESD, the embedded network, all of those provisions, and working with residents to help preserve trees and things. I think that that's absolutely fantastic, and I really do applaud you. But for me, I'm gonna actually request a refusal tonight, and it is on the grounds of the bulk and the height of the site. I just don't agree, and if I was living near it, that's not something that I would want to see. So I acknowledge the work that you've done over the last couple of days, but for me, I will not be supporting this application, and that's what I'll be taking through to VCAT. And for those having a look there, that's what I've put up on the board there. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bolton.
I don't have a lot to say in addition to what Councillor Martin has already put forward. I feel that in some ways, if councillors are prepared to pass this refusal, I feel that we'll be trying to fix up a problem of a stranded site, if you like, that wasn't covered by the zone development overlay. I just personally think that this a building of this scale, I don't think there was any need for the developer to to propose a development of this size, of this height. I think it is overdevelopment on the site. And also, as an extra point, I feel that the argument about the disability accessible units within the development is also problematic, because people have friends with disabilities. It's not just a question of owners who might have a disability. People can have friends who regularly like to visit who might have a disability. It shouldn't be just, and obviously it's not just your development, it's many developments are like this. It shouldn't just be something for if an owner happens to have a disability. It should be, buildings should be designed so that people who've got disabilities can go and visit their mates and hang out. But my main reason for supporting this refusal is on the basis that I just don't think it's an appropriate level of development for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Fran?
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting against this one, Councillor Martin, and foreshadowing the council officer's alternative recommendation that was tabled today. I think everyone spoke really well, and I was really on the fence on this one. And I actually agree with Councillor Martin that 6 stories here is too much. and it's probably too bulky. I genuinely agree with you. Just looking at the site, it doesn't seem to be anything like that in the area. The problem here is that if we vote against it tonight and they go back to VCAT, it's now in VCAT's hands. And looking at VCAT's track record, I honestly think that they'll probably give the developer 109 units, not the 90 that you've negotiated. They'll probably give them not the full scale, not the setbacks that you've successfully negotiated. That's what I'm concerned about. So it's coming from a place of pragmatism where I think you've negotiated a good outcome, and I'm happy to support that outcome because I feel that if we vote against it tonight, it's probably going to go to VCAT and you'll get an even worse outcome. They just are pretty supportive of if it's compliant with the planning scheme, which I acknowledge is probably a problem on this site, then they'll provide the application. So it's just a place of pragmatism. It's not a sense of I'm in love with this proposal. It's not that at all. I'm just fearful that you're going to get a far more bulkier, far more scaled development rather than what you've actually worked hard to negotiate. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to be moving the alternative recommendation that the officers have put forward tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Abood.
I will be supporting the refusal. Panos, I wasn't planning on referring to the other developments that you're involved in as a new developer in the City of Moreland, but considering you brought it up, I think that you've done better, and I hope to see you do better in the future. I don't think it might go to VCAT, I think it will go to VCAT because I know that you've got a formidable team of people that you're working with. I don't think that VCAT will necessarily let it through because I don't think that it's compliant with the Moreland planning scheme, which I've been reading. It's my new best friend. I used to read novels, but now I read the planning scheme. I think that I'm not here to endorse the negotiations of the 55/57 residents. And having spent a bit of time at VCAT this week, I feel like it's a pretty intimidating experience, those compulsory conferences, and that the residents as objectors would have had a responsibility to engage in a dialogue with the applicants, which would have got to this outcome. I'm not surprised it took so long because it's a pretty involved plan. I do trust that VCAT will do what they need to do, but I'm standing here as an Urban Planning Committee member, and I feel that my responsibility to the city is to refuse this proposal because I feel like I have the levers to do that inside the Moreland planning scheme. I think that it doesn't make a positive contribution to the public realm compared to some of the other buildings that you're involved in. On a busy Nicholson Street, it might be different, and your other development is different. I don't think it provides a suitable transition at the interfaces with the adjoining zones. I don't see that this neighbourhood is going to change very much more than it already has. There's quite a lot of, dwellings there that are not houses from 50 or 60 years ago that are going to turn into new apartments like we're seeing in other parts of the city. I think that the development doesn't really integrate with the surrounding environment, which is also in the planning scheme. And I think that there's other more practical issues, the bulk, the neighbourhood character. I know that everybody wants the right thing for the city, and I'm just standing here. I can't speak for the residents, otherwise there are other things that I can't knock back that I would knock back. I have to work within this scheme, and I feel like the levers are here that this building could be better. And I actually believe that you'll make it better. So I look forward to seeing what else happens after VCAT comes back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brood. Are there any further speakers? Oh, Councillor Carly Hannon.
So I'm going to rise to support the refusal. I was actually also really on the fence on this one, and I have to say that there's parts that I do really like about the design. I think that the work that the residents and the developers have done in the setbacks and the rooftop and things, I think the character, the idea of it does really fit in with what we want to see and with the community, and particularly in that East Brunswick pocket. But I have to agree that the height and the density, I think, doesn't work, and that if it was on Nicholson Street and on a busier road, it would be, because that location along, that corridor with the tram, with the bicycle route is a really great area to develop. However, I use that bus regularly. I've walked around there. Many of my friends have lived in those townhouses, and I just recognise that 6 stories there and the way that the traffic will flow is not going to make that a really enjoyable, viable place to live. So I think this is a challenging one, and I would really like to see an option that, you know, obviously it's going to be denser than what we currently have, but something that is going to be much more supportive to the location.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Kavanagh.
I'm also rising to support the motion of Councillor Martins. I do find it a very difficult one, and I think Councillor Farley made some very good points there in arguing the other way. But I do think that when you look at this now, although there's been some changes, and yes, there have been negotiated changes, the 6 stories still for me is a bridge too far, and so that's the reason why I'm supporting the alternative. The bulk for me is far too much. I realise that the residents have had a bit of a nightmare here, having to spend hours and hours at VCAT, etc. And unfortunately, that is a bit of a fault of the system that. I know the applicant was complaining, but at least the applicant's probably getting paid to be there, whereas the residents are doing it of their own accord and actually costing them money to be there, I know. So I understand that. But I do think that this is worth, and I do think it's worth us putting forward that it's still not acceptable and that our officers will then pursue this refusal at VCAT as strongly as they can.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I too will just add a few words as well. I wanted to also thank the residents who have really taken up this baton to fight this fight at VCAT themselves through mediation, and I will be supportive of a refusal as well, because I believe that it's not an appropriate development for the site. I'm got a lot of faith in Council's ability and our experts to take up the baton that you have and really put a good argument for a refusal forward. I think that this interface with the neighbourhood residential zone and the Merri Creek is too sensitive, and it's something that Councillor Frani's points about taking the risk of going to VCAT, it's a risk here that I'm willing to take, because I think we've got a very good argument here. I think we can potentially, with Council's experts and our officers now taking over the baton from the residents, it's something that we can fight and potentially win. So that's my view on why I'll be refusing, supportive of a refusal. So councillors, now ask all of us to vote on this. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I'll now hand over to Vita to outline the legal process from here.
Thank you, Mayor Davidson. So the Urban Planning Committee has just resolved that it does not consent to the agreement reached by the other parties, and therefore Council's position at VCAT will be that no planning permit should issue. As a result, the matter will proceed to a hearing on the 7th of August, and Council will contest the proposal on the grounds as that were part of the recommendation that was moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. I'll just take some clarification if we need to vote to hand the chair back over. We do? Yep, okay. All those in favour of...
Councillor, I'll move the councillor.
Moved by Councillor Kavanagh, seconded by Councillor Farney. All those in favour of Councillor Ratnam resuming the chair, I declare that carried.
Councillors, we're now moving on to the 2 motions regarding Pentridge, and I know Councillor Abood will leave the chamber because she has a conflict on both these items. So we're now moving on to DD 6517, Building 16 and B Division, Pentridge, and I'll hand over to the officer to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. So you can see up on the screen, I'll just bring up the presentation. So the proposal this evening is for Building 16 and B Division of Pentridge, which includes a hotel, apartments and adaptive reuse of B Division. We can see on the left there the context of the site. The site fits within the activity centre zone and is also affected by Heritage Overlay 47. And then on the right of the screen you can see the proposed the site of the proposed development in the corner of Champ Street and Pentridge Boulevard. The development is for a 19-storey building, including a rooftop terrace comprising a residential hotel and apartments, adaptive reuse of B Division and B Division Annex, alteration of access to a road in a road zone, reduction in loading bay requirements and display of internally illuminated business identification signs. With regards to the heritage component of the proposal, Heritage Victoria have issued a heritage permit for the buildings and works, and that occurred on the 7th of July this year. Council made a submission to Heritage Victoria regarding the proposal before it issued its permit. Therefore, Council's assessment can't consider the heritage overlay. Moving on to the site of the proposed development, I'll just outline to you the intrusions into the wall. So we've got a new proposed access through the wall here from Champ Street, a pedestrian entrance here off Champ Street as well, and a new entry to a porte cochere here, and two entry and exit points to the underground car park here, as well as a separate pedestrian entry into the apartments. Moving through the floor plans, we have the lower level of, this is a little bit hard to work out here, but this is the lower level of B Division at the eastern end, and that is to be reused for a day spa. That includes a pool and a gym at that level, and then moving up a level to ground level, we have the rest of the day spa at first level. In here we have retail and a cafe, and then a component for the hotel lobby. And then the southern side is heritage interpretation on the southern wing, which includes reusing the panopticons for heritage interpretation and landscaping. And then moving up, moving up a level to the first level, we've got reuse of this level for hotel rooms as well as conference facilities. And I didn't mention the reuse of B Division Annex here on ground level. This is for a restaurant. This is the hotel component here. And then moving up to the floor plan. So this is actually a basement level. There's 3 levels of basement car parking. Moving up to the residential hotel. This is an example of a floor plan for the residential hotel. And then moving up to the top levels where we have residential apartments. And this is an indicative layout of the residential apartments, and then a rooftop terrace for a portion of the building. And then some elevations to give you an indication of the size of the building, the height and its appearance from each elevation. So public notice has taken place and 29 objections were received, or have been received to date. The main issues raised include the height, impact to heritage character, parking and traffic, precedent that might be set, and property values. A planning and information discussion meeting was held on 15th of June, and during the application process, the applicant provided a legal opinion that the application is exempt from public notice on the basis that it's generally in accordance with the activity centre zone. And council officers then proceeded to also obtain legal advice which offered a similar opinion that the proposal is generally in accordance with the master plan and therefore would be exempt from public notice for the components that require a planning permit under the activity centre zone. However, council is able to consider the concerns raised by the objectors. However, one implication is the objectors will not have a right of appeal in relation to building height or heritage or other components where a planning permit is required under the activity centre zone. There are aspects of the proposal that are not exempt from public notice, such as the reduction in loading bay requirements and business identification signage. And these components, obviously, people have a right of appeal on. So the key planning considerations are the building height, public realm and landscaping, and impacts to street trees. It's recommended that the Urban Planning Committee issue a notice of decision to grant a permit, and the key conditions would include tree protection measures for street trees, removal of the hard stand area forward of the Bluestone Wall on Champ Street, and the removal of the vehicle access created over the Pentridge Boulevard median strip. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll now ask if there are any objectors who wish to speak. Please come forward.
Michael Hamill Green, Kendall Street, Coburg. I have four, amongst many other objections, but four I'm going to concentrate on in the 3 minutes I've got. First, the height. I think everyone needs to be clear about the impact of this, the visual impact on Champ Street heritage streetscape, and particularly the iconic main Pentridge Bluestone Clock Tower entrance building. So this 9-storey tower is going just behind this, as the previous presenter has indicated, just behind this watchtower. And if you compare that watchtower, it's just in this is scale. The watchtower is there. You can get a sense of the enormous proportions of this building. 1 story above the master plan, I should say, requirements. Secondly, my objection is that the Moreland Planning Report dismisses the impact of this on the Coburg Lake landscape, which is, of course, outside the heritage designation that Heritage Victoria is considered. So it says that the site is considered to be separate from the Coburg Lake Reserve and would not be visually dominant or highly visible from the reserve. So another photo. There's the park, the lake. There's A Division. You can just see the aerial. This is the aerial on the top of the clock tower. It's goes to about a third of the height of the total tower, and it's on the same level. So there's absolutely no doubt the tower is going to be between there and highly visible from the Coburg Lake Park. And you can see the outcome of 2 other 8-storey blocks on that park in the southeastern corner. A huge impact on the park, but the council appear to have no interest in preventing at that time, in the previous application. So thirdly, the visual features of the tower are completely misrepresented, both by the developer and the council report. It's the council report saying the design of the building tapers out from a thinner element at the lower base to a wider element at the upper residential levels. This is deliberately reversing the meaning of the word taper. The developer, for their part, is equally misleading, talking of creating a slender sculptural response to the massive qualities of the setting. And as can be seen from the developer's own architectural drawing, the tower would do exactly the opposite, have a top-heavy and massive appearance and dwarf its bluestone surroundings. Fourthly and lastly, we are now much more aware of the high-rise fire risks exposed by the 80 fatalities in the recent London 23-storey Grenfell Tower cladding fire disaster, and also evident in the Docklands lacrosse fire 2 years ago, and also evident in the Manstey Square 9-storey tower in Brunswick 4 months ago. So the developer and council have assured us that all such risks will be dealt with at the building permit rather than the planning stage. However, the building permit stage has clearly not prevented such fires to date and has serious problems in terms of both inspection issues and follow-up of previously granted permits in the light of new fire risk knowledge. Some fire risks need to be addressed at the design and planning permit stage. Most of the deaths in the Grenfell disaster were amongst upper-storey residents who discovered their one and only stairwell was filled with smoke and unable to be used, while at the same time they were too high up for fire brigade ladders to reach them. As London University structural engineer Dr. Feng Fu notes in an article in The Conversation just about a month ago, 15th of June, it is not only having non-combustible materials that matters, but also having, quote, extra fire evacuation staircases and, quote, refuge rooms for higher storey occupants. It should be noted from the Shayer's architectural plans for this Pentridge 90-storey tower. This is right near the top of the building. That despite all we've learnt about high-rise fires since the lacrosse fire and the Grenfell fire, their proposed tower has only one stairwell for upper residents and no refuge rooms. This is an obvious fire trap for upper storey residents and needs to be addressed at the planning permit stage. So just to urge what I think should be done, I urge Council not to approve this planning permit for the current 90-storey proposal, but rather to invite the developer to resubmit a much lower level town proposal that A, does not irrevocably damage the streetscape of Champ Street and the natural landscape of Coburg Lake Park, and B, ensures that upper level residents have the same fire protection as those on lower levels by redesigning the building to have 2 evacuation stairwells rather than just 1, fire refuge rooms in the upper storeys, and go no higher than fire brigade ladders can reach, roughly 12 to 14 storeys. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Is there another objector who wishes to speak? Well, in that case, I'll ask, is there a representative of the applicant who wishes to speak? Please come forward.
My name is Sophie Kuznachuk. I'm an associate at Contour Consultants, and we act on behalf of the permit applicant. I won't go too far into the background as that's covered within the officer's report, except to reiterate that the activity centre zone and the master plan provide clear direction for preferred height and land uses for this site. And specifically, it envisages an 18-storey residential building. The permit has obtained and tendered legal advice confirming that the proposal is generally in accordance with the master plan, and this is consistent with Council's own legal advice and the views of Council planning officers. It's acknowledged that a tension exists from Council's perspective with the content of the 2014 master plan, and that some submissions have been made to the Minister advocating for a review of the master plan, though that was refused. The officers have rightly highlighted in their report that the application must be assessed against the current controls. And the application should not be used as an opportunity to vent opposition to the master plan. Both officers and authorities support the application, including Heritage Victoria, which has obviously recently issued a heritage permit for the proposal in its current form. And no objections were received as a result of the referral process. There are many positive initiatives of the design, and indeed in making a submission to Heritage Victoria, Council noted the following attributes, including adaptive reuse of B division, integration of old and new building fabric, and landscaping the remnants of the panopticon. We agree and add that the apartments broadly comply with the objectives of the Moreland Apartment Design Code, and parking is provided discreetly at a basement level with provision that exceeds the statutory requirement. And most importantly, though, the project team has worked really hard to create a design that's fully resolved and of high architectural merit. And Cox Architects demonstrated during the design process genuine commitment to celebrating the heritage fabric. And this is seen in the way that Building 16 relates to B division, and especially the views that are available toward the basalt walls. And it can also be seen in the considered arrangement of B division and the incorporation of land uses that will encourage visitation to the building by the public and support economic development objectives for the activity centre. Finally, it should be mentioned that a valid planning permit is in place for the development of a building with a similar height. And this approved development is inferior in many ways to what is proposed now. Most notably, it doesn't include adaptive reuse of B division. It provides parking at a podium level, which would produce a poor public realm outcome and heritage outcome. And also it provides for apartments only, and not the mix of uses sought by the activity centre zone and provided by the current proposal. Share have decided to pursue a development that they believe is a better design outcome, and we support them in that decision, and we support this proposal emphatically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you are seated, I might ask if councillors have any questions of the applicant, representative of the applicant.
Yeah, I have a question.
No question?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. Yeah,
No question? No problem. No
No, I
other
do have a
question?
question.
You do have a question? Sorry,
Yeah,
Councillor
sorry.
Kavanagh, please go for it.
Okay. The design, this image here, the one that Michael pointed out, do you find that attractive? I'm not trying to be smart. Do you? Because I just don't get that. That's me. But anyway, can I ask?
So, Councillor Kavanagh, you're asking for the rationale for the design?
I am.
Yes, or yes.
Look, I see on your website it says you're committed to excellence and producing quality and etc. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm a novice. I'm just talking about the aesthetics. The aesthetics to me, I personally don't like it. Can you explain what the idea of it is?
But it's obviously a bit of a subjective opinion that you're providing.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And when you consider the form and the architecture in light of the controls that apply under the planning scheme, well, our view is that it responds positively to those objectives. In terms of the rationale, though, the idea was to create some space between the perimeter walls and the upper levels. The upper levels obviously accommodate the apartments, and those apartments, to meet your design code, require a little bit more space as well. So the architect's view and our view is that it creates some breathing space between the walls and then the upper levels.
Okay. Well, thank you for the rationale.
Thank you. Any further questions of the applicant from councillors? No, thank you very much for that. Please be seated. Now ask, are there any further questions? Is there a recommendation or motion before council? Councillor Bolton, yes.
I'd like to move that the Urban Planning Committee resolve that a refusal to grant a planning permit number MPS 2016-876 be issued for the development of the land for a 19-storey building including rooftop terrace comprising a residential hotel and apartments, adaptive reuse of B Division and B Division Annex, alteration of access to a road in a road zone, reduction in loading bay requirements and display of internally illuminated business identification signs at lot S4 and S6 Champ Street, Coburg on the following grounds. 1, the scale of the building does not represent a high-quality design response as required by the Pentridge-Coburg Design Guidelines and Master Plan, February 2014, in relation to the building's immediate interfaces and the broader neighbourhood. 2, the proposal is not consistent with the Activity Centre Zone Clause 37.08 of the Moreland Planning Scheme for the following reasons. A, the scale and appearance of the building does not respond to or complement the character of the significant heritage buildings that it abuts. B, the development is not of an exemplary quality design and will not make a positive contribution to the character of the neighbourhood. C, the building design does not reference the datum of existing bluestone former prison buildings and the bluestone boundary walls and would overwhelm the presence of these features. 3, the advertising signage is not consistent with the advertising signs provisions of the Moreland Planning Scheme, Clause 52.05, as A, the signs are not designed to be respectful of the recognised heritage values of the site, B, the signs are not compatible with the desired future character of the area, and lastly, number 4, the reduction in loading bay requirements of Clause 52.07, loading and unloading of vehicles of the Moreland Planning Scheme is not appropriate as the reduced height will not allow for the full range of deliveries required by the proposed use and will therefore require unloading to occur in the street, unreasonably impacting on traffic and parking in the locality.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there a seconder to Councillor Bolton's motion? Councillor Kavanagh? Thank you. Councillor Bolton, we wish to speak to you.
So my main reasons for proposing this alternative recommendation to what's in the agenda is because I just, it's not just the height, but the bulk of the building, as Councillor Kavanagh just pointed out with reference to the photo where it sort of bulges out. And I think at a previous Urban Planning Committee meeting, it was referenced that this would be the first sort of high rise that you see as you come in on the highway from Sydney coming into Melbourne. This would be the first really big, impactful building that people see as they come in from the north of the city. I do find it aesthetically unpleasing, and I just think it is. I mean, even besides all of the heritage considerations, I think it is a massive bulk. Looking at it from all different directions, but especially, you know, looking at it from the profile where it sort of bulks out, I think this really is will be the dominating thing that people will see when they look towards the prison. I just think it's I just I mean, I think there aren't a lot of other arguments really against it. But I also think the height is also excessive for this location. I note that it is a story higher than what was proposed in the master plan, a master plan which was developed by the developers without public input. I also think there's some other issues which I didn't have time to address before tonight, but I think the objector raises some very valid points which relate not just to this building but other high-rise buildings about the need for more fire escapes and refuges for residents trying to escape fires. And it's not just, you know, there have been quite a large number of high-rise fires around the world, not only the Grenfell one that we know about and the one in Melbourne that we know about, but several in Dubai. And, you know, I mean, this is something to consider because even cladding, which is meets Australian standards, doesn't necessarily meet other safety standards. So I think even though I'm aware that the developer has said that they'll have compliant cladding, I think, you know, our standards in Australia are quite low with regard to this, and so these other safety features need to be looked at as well. But I think my main focus with this resolution is on the visual bulk and height.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh.
Actually, just to reiterate, I think Councillor Bolton summed up, and I think the refusal points out very clearly exactly the concerns that I have, and I'm thankful that the alternative was prepared. Yes, and I know it probably is subjective, but the actual look of the building, to be honest, even if it didn't have the heritage clock tower and the wall in front of it, even if it was anywhere else in the city of Moreland, including the middle of Sydney Road, I would still be voting against this. I just feel as if, and I realise we can't make decisions on heritage grounds, so even if I was to put that to one side, and ideally in this table I have to, unfortunately, I still wouldn't be supporting it. I'm sorry, I just don't want that building in Moreland.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Yes, I'm standing to speak against, or just in support of this amendment or proposal that Councillor Bolton has put up, principally on the grounds of first and second parts of this motion around the scale of the building and the quality of the design. It isn't possible for us to require or request that this be of an international scale and scope and so magnificent that it would be something exemplary in the world stage. But I really think that's what we require here in this city, and I don't want something that's kind of something that I could find in the CBD or the Docklands. It's not really, you know, it's difficult to find grounds to object to this because we've been set up by the state government and we've had to wear this, and the community are wearing it. And normally, under this scheme and the way that we manage the issue, the City Council gets to implement the rules that have been set by the state government. And unfortunately, you're here tonight with me having to make such a submission. However, I think that the Heritage Victoria is definitely broken, that they would allow something like this to happen in such an iconic place. I can't do anything about that as a councillor, but I can in terms of ethically and honestly just saying I can't support this motion. Normally, if it fits within the planning scheme, and I know the officers have spent a lot of time on this and really have done a lot of work on it, and it's not difficult to actually stand up and do this, but I just, on grounds of ethically not being able to support such a high building, as has been mentioned. That I really can't support that, and I have to support Councillor Bolton's motion on this in terms of the scale and the height. If it was actually an exemplary, environmentally sustainable building that was outstanding on the world stage, you know, I think 9 kilowatts or something of, you know, photovoltaics on a building like that, the place, you know, in this day and age where we're going on in terms of the planet, really it needs to be something more than that. And I know there are other environmental provisions in the building, but really they're fairly ordinary. And there are other buildings that we're getting that are coming to us that are way above this standard, and I want to see that kind of thing coming here. I can't require you to do that, I know that, but I would like to see something that was much more inspiring, something that was really exemplary for Coburg, exemplary for the City of Moreland, and I really think on the scale and the height and all those issues and the way that we've been set up by former planning ministers and current ones, this is really something that I can't support as a proposal, so I'm supporting Councillor Bolton's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I'd like also to say a few words if no one else wishes to speak. I too would like to... Pardon? Sorry, Councillor Carly Hannon, please go forward.
Yeah, I rise to also support Councillor Bolton's motion. So, yeah, thinking about this, I mean, I agree with what is already being said. I understand that the master plan is already there, but I do feel like as a member of the Urban Planning Committee and an elected councillor, that I'm voting on what I believe is good for the city. And I actually do really like the work around the hotel idea and the refurbishment of the heritage. So, you know, there's things there that for me actually do stand out, and I could sit there and support them and think this is, you know, a good use of a very important heritage site for our community. But this 19-storey building is not the case, and I wouldn't feel comfortable telling people that I'd support it.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Farnley?
Thank you. I'm going to vote against this one. I think I rise to speak to you guys just to clarify my position. Thank you, Michael and Larry, I think it is, and I think there's a few other Pentridge team members from your group here tonight. I just respectfully disagree. My position is I'm actually quite comfortable with the building. That's just the conclusion I've come to. I've done a lot of consultation myself. I think I made myself available to meet with your group much earlier this year. Unfortunately, none of the meeting didn't go ahead. I think it's due to lack of interest. But I've also done additional consultation through social media. I've done additional consultation through other community groups. And I'm personally quite comfortable with this building. It's just the conclusion I've come to. I understand where you're coming from in terms of the height is probably the biggest issue for you guys, because it's going to be quite stark compared to the height size of the walls. I understand where you're coming from. My perspective is I think the actual development is going to add a lot of value to Moreland and the precincts. I think from my perspective, we don't have anything like this in the city of Moreland. An example is the Northern Business Networking Function events have to be held in Darabin at Bell City, because we just don't have any function space within the city of Moreland to have any capacity to actually do anything to attract into the local economy. I think it's going to do a lot of good things for the area in terms of interfacing with the heritage of the site. It needs to be compliant with a lot of heritage regulations that have been put in. I've been concerned since I've come on council with the tone around the discussion around this site. If you have a difference of opinion, then you must be in the developer's pockets, or you must be anti-heritage or something. That's just not the case. We're allowed to have free speech and a free opinion, free thought. I personally am quite comfortable with this development, and I can say it and put that on the table for you, having consulted heavily with all community groups. And I just don't like that tone that gets put back on councillors. Whenever you make a decision, you must be an evil, corrupt council. I'm proudly one of only 3 councillors actually around this table that didn't take a single cent from anybody during the council elections. So I don't know anybody any favours. I can make a free opinion, and I think from my perspective, the actual application is going to add a lot of value to the city of Moreland in terms of job creation, opportunities, and also residential apartments. 2 to 3 rooms per apartment will mean there's a lot of families that will be able to live onto the site as well. So that's why I'll be voting against this one.
Thank you, Councillor Finley. No other councillors wish to speak. I'll just conclude, therefore, I too will be supporting Councillor Bolton's motion for the range of reasons and for all the reasons that have been outlined by all the councillors who have spoken in favour of the motion. I think it is excessive for Moreland, for Coburg and for this site. I know that the master plan indicates that it can go up to 18 stories. That in itself is disappointing that application has come beyond that height, knowing the concern that this council and communities had over multiple years about the height proposed at this site. So I'm really disappointed that we've had not only an application that doesn't seem to have given much credence to the level of community concern and council concern over the last number of years, but it's actually exceeded that. So that is a really important, I think, and a poignant statement about the intention, the future intention. And I'm really concerned. I'm more concerned about it now than I have been previously, actually. Council has clearly stated what it wants to see in terms of the Coburg Activity Centre. We're not saying keep it at 1 story. We have approved a structure plan that allows for up to 10 stories. Obviously, there'll be strategic sites. This is one of the strategic sites that this community has been talking about for multiple years, but it was taken away from us in terms of the community and council's control over successive state governments and successive state planning ministers of the different political persuasions. This master plan was developed, which this community did not want. We have attempted to review the master plan, as you've indicated. While the minister said no, we started a subsequent process where we gave the opportunity to all the applicants to work with us as a council and community to get an outcome that we can come into some sort of agreement and some sort of compromise on. And I too have been disappointed that those offers haven't been taken up. We could have found an outcome that was amiable to the community that we could work together to achieve. And I'm really disappointed that we're at this stage where we're getting an application that exceeds even the excessive height that's proposed for the master plan. So for all those reasons, I will be voting in favour of Councillor Bolton's motion and against this application. And I hope that the spirit of open negotiation is still this council's intention, and I hope that the applicants, all the applicants involved in this Pentridge site that are covered by this master plan will heed that and we work with us as a council and a community and not work against us for the decades to come. On that note, I'll put that to the vote. Certainly, Councillor Bolton.
I would like to respond to a couple of points that Councillor Farnley made. In particular, he made the comment, I don't have the exact words, but something about adding value to the city or, improving the city. I don't think that is necessarily the case. I mean, certainly, if this building goes ahead, it will create a precedent because we know that the minister stripped away mandatory height limits from the centre of Coburg. So it certainly create a precedent, which, if this goes ahead, other developers will also be looking to do exactly the same thing in the centre of Coburg. But also, like nowadays in Melbourne and many other cities as well, people are attracted to, a lot of the thriving shopping strips are the ones which have maintained a lot of their heritage shop fronts and heritage buildings and so forth. It's, I actually think this could, if we start a trend here with approving this building and other buildings like it, I actually think we might attract some people but drive a lot of other people away because I think if you look at a range of different shopping strips around Melbourne, people are attracted from outer suburbs into those locations because there are a lot of the older heritage sort of shops and so forth and, there in areas where some of the heritage has been preserved. And by that, I'm not just talking about the actual historic heritage of Pentridge, but like the ambience of those sorts of areas. So I'm not at all convinced by that argument at all. I also think we do need to take account of, and we probably haven't focused on this as much, but the fact that the Coburg Lake Reserve is meant to be sort of like a little oasis or a sanctuary in the centre of Coburg, and the whole stretch of the Merri Creek, which is probably in a better condition than Many Ponds Creek. And I think we do need to think about that is, yes, while we live in the hustle and bustle of the city and so forth, and you can't have total quietness and so forth, but the whole principle of having places like Coburg Lakes Reserve is having some sanctuary elements within the city so that people can escape. I mean, it's important from the point of view of mental health and so forth. And I think that we do have something quite precious there that I think we need to think as a council how we try and preserve that sort of sanctuary and oasis. It's already being impinged on by development that's already
Councillor Bolton,
started
if you
to
can
happen.
start winding
But
up,
yeah,
please.
I just think this is something we've got to think about in the future as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll now put that motion, Councillor Bolton's motion, to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I'll now turn to the officer to outline the next steps.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. So the Urban Planning Committee have decided to refuse to grant a planning permit on the grounds outlined by Councillor Bolton. The applicant has an opportunity to appeal Council's decision once Council issues its decision in the next week or so. And all objectors will be invited to participate in the appeal process. A copy of Council's refusal will also be sent to all objectors, which will outline Council's grounds of refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to DD 6617, which is Building 9 and A Division of Pentridge Coburg, and turn to the officer for the presentation.
With the spinning wheel. Oh. It's difficult.
Nothing like waiting for technology to work with everything.
Okay, sorry for the delay.
No problem.
So the proposal that I'd like to outline to you now is Building 9 and A Division at Pentridge. This includes a shopping centre and adaptive reuse of A Division. Again, just for your benefit, the context of the site again in the activity centre zone and heritage overlay 47. And on the right of the screen, the aerial photo shows an outline in red of the location of the proposed building. This is the shopping centre here, so relatively close to the centre of the site, which is generally bounded by Murray Road to the north, Champ Street to the west, and Pentridge Boulevard to the south. The proposal is for the construction of a 4-level commercial building, which includes a supermarket, proposed supermarket and cinemas, and some other boutique shopping shops, and adaptive reuse of A Division and a reduction in car parking requirement. In this instance, the proposal was considered by officers to be generally in accordance with the activity centre zone and therefore exempt from public notice, and that's outlined in the activity centre zone, that if it is generally in accordance with the objectives in Clause 2 or requirements of Clause 5 of this schedule and the Pentridge Coburg Master Plan, February 2014, the proposal is exempt from public notice. Similarly to Building 16, Heritage Victoria is responsible for considering the heritage application, and therefore Council's assessment cannot consider heritage in this instance. Council has made a submission to Heritage Victoria and we don't have a decision from Heritage Victoria at this point in time. Moving on to the plans, you can see on the right of the screen the A Division building, and then to the left of that is the remains of a guard tower and a small section of wall, which is to be retained, and then the shopping centre will be generally located in this area here. This is the basement level. 3 basement levels. So on the right of the screen, we have A Division, which is to be reused on the east and west wings to be reused as studios or offices. On the northern end is proposed to be used as a performance space, and then the southern end, similar to B division, we have some heritage interpretation of the existing cells. Moving up a level, we have the main shopping centre level, which includes the boutique shops here and supermarket at the northern end of the building. Then moving up a level, we have the cinemas and some food and drink premises on this side of the building. And in elevation, east and west, and we can see to the right of the screen here and left of the screen here, which is the existing A division and the lantern of the building. And then looking from the north and the south of the building, some section diagrams. So the key considerations in this instance are the landscaping and public realm outcome, activation of the northwest corner of the building where it has interaction with A division, and amenity considerations of surrounding properties, as well as the car parking reduction. It's recommended that the Urban Planning Committee grant a planning permit, and the key conditions that have been included in the recommendation are the inclusion of a small commercial tenancy on the northwest or both elevations of the building to generate activation in the northwest corner of the building, provision of a public realm landscape plan, including the piazza and the area to the north and west of A division building, control of hours for loading and unloading to minimise noise impacts to residents, and a car parking management plan to manage the provision of car parking for other uses across the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I note that because this application didn't go to exhibition, there weren't any formal objectors. However, I will be inviting the applicant to make a submission in terms of the application. So I'm also willing to hear if there's anyone who wishes to speak to this application, for or against. You may come to the lectern and speak. Yep, there's two there. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Larry Carter. I'm concerned that the Building 9, which is a retailing cinema complex in its proposed form, is going to dominate the historic A division structure because of its proximity, its visual bulk and its height. Being so close to A division means that the view from the southeast quadrant of the major remaining landmark structure is going to be completely obstructed. Also, its facade of modern materials and colours will contrast negatively with the bluestone neighbour unless it's set further back. And at over 77 metres in height, it's actually going to be higher than the roof lantern of A division. The building itself presents as one massive, mostly rectangular, flat top shoebox with little visual appeal but lots of bulk. This is because it's just shops and cinema on top of a large car park, the sort of thing you see at any suburban shopping mall. It'd be more suited next to an industrial park than right up against one of the most important historic buildings in Moreland, if not Victoria. The proposal in its current form should be refused on neighbourhood character grounds alone. The two buildings couldn't be more distinct from one another. The first one, A division, is more than just historic architecture. It's a place that changed people's lives forever. It's where many executions took place. Contrast that with the function of the building next door. This clash between the older bluestone structure with its rare cruciform shape and the shopping centre next to it could be reduced, if not entirely eliminated, by a redesign that separates the two buildings a lot more. The northern end of Building 9 should be repositioned further south, near the original enclosure wall. This would allow A division to be viewed properly from all vantage points. It's important to note the developer has already proposed infill buildings next to the only other similar structure, which is B division. If the shopping centre were set back further, it would allow at least one of the two remaining cruciform buildings to remain viewable by future generations. For the developer, a redesign and a reposition would mean a building that's slightly reduced in size, but which could protect the existing A division layout. A reduced footprint could be achieved if there weren't 3 levels of car parking, and this was only ever justified due to the scale of the proposed building. It's quite possible that Building 9 needn't be so large, or positioned where it is, or require such a massive footprint for it to be economically viable. We can't test this because the developer removed the figures from their report. Lastly, I want to touch upon the amenity impact on neighbours. The planning report says that the impacts will be minimal, but I disagree. The writer is obviously unaware of the important views that would be lost by neighbours living in Champ Street, such as ourselves. We can almost see the entire prison complex from our living room and balcony, and putting Building 9 in its proposed location would obstruct many important historic buildings from view, as well as obscure the prison's place in the overall landscape.
If I could please ask you to start concluding, we've just run out of time.
We host many visitors who marvel at what we see from our building, and it's one of the few places in Melbourne where you can do this. I've got photos to show this, but they don't even do it justice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your submission. Would you like to come forward?
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I've raised concerns about the pedestrian treatment on Road D. It's claimed within this report that the pedestrians are going to be given priority, that there's going to be a paving treatment. However, within the plans shown, there is no paving treatment shown. There is, in fact, a pedestrian crossing. Why need a pedestrian crossing if the street is pedestrian priority? Secondly, the developers own this bit of land. They do not own this part of Road D. So, have they got an agreement with the landowners on either side of Road D that this too is going to be pedestrian priority? What does pedestrian priority mean, what's more? Does it mean that cars can drive there? Does it mean what? They have a 5 km/h limit? Is it proposing that this be a shared zone under Vic Roads regulations, 5 km/h limit? If they're so concerned about the use of vehicles, if they want to encourage pedestrians here, it would be a pedestrian-only area. So I'm deeply concerned that this is a proposal which is unrealistic, which will be ineffective, and which does not create a pedestrian priority zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dolby. Mr. Hemel-Green?
Michael Hemel-Green, Kendall Street, Coburg. I don't want to repeat some of the things that have already been said, but I would just want to add 3 more points because I did object to this particular development plan to Heritage Victoria. Firstly, my concern is that council should not be considering this until Heritage Victoria has decided on the permit application. There may be very relevant areas of concern that affect the overall planning. Secondly, this development is including A division, but perhaps not realised by many people, is that A division includes H division. H division is the most historic, controversial, and something that the public has been most interested in. It is designated, I know the developer has indicated, for heritage interpretation, but in terms of keeping a visual space around H division is absolutely crucial, and the proximity of the cinema supermarket complex just makes that absolutely impossible. The third point I'd make is something that has exercised Champ Street residents and many of us for over the last year and a half, is one of the traffic exits. There's a 30-metre spotted gum tree that sits on council land, which council was about to cut down on the basis that the developer has requested this, despite the fact that the heritage overlay in Champ Street, that tree was designated as one of the heritage trees. It went to VCAT and council fought the residents on this, but in the councillors later said that they hadn't been aware that it had gone to VCAT, and they didn't approve of there was a resolution, I think, that indicated they didn't approve of the cutting down of the tree and that there would be negotiations with the developer. So in consultations that we had with the developer the other week, I understood them to be saying the tree would not be cut down, but the latest I hear is the developer is still insisting that the council cut down that tree, despite the fact that there are many options for tree islands that have been used both on the other side of Pentridge and in other parts of Moreland that make it quite feasible to preserve that tree. So that's a further small aspect of my objection to this development proposal. Some condition that makes sure that that tree is preserved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hemel-Green. I'll now ask if there's a representative of the applicant who wishes to speak.
Sophie Kuznachuk from Contour Consultants. Just to respond to a few points that have been raised
Yes,
so far. Firstly, parking. There's a surplus of parking provided having regard to the requirements under clause 52.06, and that's quite important because the surplus is to cater for some of the parking that will be generated by buildings within Pentridge Coburg that don't have the capacity to provide for on-street parking. It said that a reduction is required, but there's actually a surplus of parking. Road D is a privately owned road, and it is proposed to be a shared road, and that's achieved through consideration of levels and paving, and all of those details are set out within the landscape plan. It's been quite comprehensively reviewed, and we've also been working with the officers to make sure that the way that building interfaces to the public realm and the way that works from even accessibility perspective is all is resolved. And just finally, and in response to discussion about the removal of the tree, that's a separate application altogether and it's not part. The permit applicant just respectfully asks that that a decision be made on this application rather than any further deferral. There shouldn't be any confusion arising from there being two separate applications to Council and to Heritage Victoria. They are two distinct applications, and should Heritage Victoria permit the development and require changes, then those would have to be reflected in any planning approval. I know that Anthony from Shea presented to you a month ago, so I just thought we'd reiterate some of those comments and expand on those. Firstly, and most importantly, the proposal delivers a commercial hub to Pentridge Coburg, and it will act as a catalyst for further investment and economic activity in the precinct. It includes a substantial supermarket and a cinema, noting that Palace Cinemas is a confirmed tenant, and the hub will cater to local tenants, local residents, workers and visitors from further afield. Again, the parking provision exceeds the statutory requirement, and that's going to be managed through a car parking management plan. The applicant has engaged Melbourne's preeminent architect for commercial buildings, Bucking Group, and this demonstrates their commitment to good design, visitor amenity and environmental sustainability. Notably, the architecture and layout of Building 9 integrates with the piazza, so the emphasis is on providing for pedestrian flow and movement from the piazza, which is obviously where a lot of the pedestrians will be into the commercial centre. And it provides for the adaptive reuse of A division, with a community focus including performance theatre and office incubator space. It's envisaged that A division would become a shared community asset, something like Siteworks in Brunswick, with the intent of protecting the integrity of the building but also integrating some uses that will mean that it can be used well into the future in a meaningful way. Having regard to heritage considerations, the development scheme is the result of a rigorous design process with input from Bryce Rayworth and Associates, Heritage Victoria and Sue Hodges. Dialogue with Heritage Victoria is ongoing.
If I could just please ask you to start summing up, we've just run out of time.
Finally, the proposal, including the number of levels, is consistent with the master plan, and obviously it receives officer support.
Thank you very much. I might ask before you sit down if there's any questions of the applicant. Councillor Kavanagh.
I'll just ask about the page 200 of the agenda, where we have an image of the colours. Can you explain what the rationale is for the red and the grey, the red colour in particular?
I believe it's a Corten steel.
I'm sorry?
The red,
yes,
it depicts, it's just obviously an artist representation of what it would be, but it depicts perforated Corten steel, which sort of has a rusty kind of colour.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any further questions, Councillor Bolton?
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if in the plans for this, there was ever any thought about moving the shopping centre away from the cruciform building, away from A division, a bit further to create more space so that people could actually, walk around it and so has that ever been something, I'm not sure how long you've put for the applicant, but has that ever been something that's been considered?
Not in terms of space, but what was considered is the layout of the buildings within the master plan, and also the hierarchy of pedestrian spaces within and around all of the buildings, and this space between Road D and then heading north It's not intended to be a major pedestrian route, and so the envelope of the building is consistent with what is shown on the master plan. And we've integrated heritage interpretation strategy across that wall as a way to improve the presence of the building along that interface. But the emphasis has been on obviously providing an appropriate interface to the piazza, and then there are still views and plenty of space around the prison building from the other aspects, which is considered to be adequate.
Any further questions of the applicant? Councillor Martin?
I don't know if you could just elaborate a little bit further on that, around the shared path and priority for pedestrians and those sort of considerations, just in a little bit more detail than what you just touched on before.
So what the master plan envisages is that that road will be shared between pedestrians and vehicles, and achieves that by having rather than a defined road with a curb and a footpath, it's just one space that will be shared, except that it delineates spaces using paving treatments to show and to encourage pedestrians to use certain aspects of the road.
I suppose my follow-up question would be, the speed limits of that. I mean, the anticipation, is it going to be 5 kilometres an hour? Would it be 10? I mean, what is the expectation around that? I mean,
I expect it will be a slow limit, but that hasn't been, I suppose, fully considered as part of this application.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, just a question regarding the lantern of the building adjacent. It seems to be, it's almost to the same height, depending whether you take in the roof plan is set back. I'm just curious about how, or will people from the new building, if it is to be built, will one day, but will they be able to look down or view the rest of the complex? Because I was sharing Councillor Bolton's concern around people not being able to walk around the outside of the building, but how else are they able to observe that building from the new location? What's the interaction?
One of the key design objectives for this building under the master plan is that the height relates to the lantern. So that's actually an objective that is met by the proposal. But there are views from toward the lantern from the piazza and from other locations, and that's included in the application material. There are renders that show that those views are available. Of course, from some perspectives, if you're going to be closer to the building, it's not going to be visible, but from the longer distant views and walking around the building, it will be clear.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Now ask councillors if there's a motion. Councillor Farnley.
I have an alternative recommendation that I'd like to view, which has been circulated a little earlier.
Yep.
And it is essentially the council officer's recommendation, but we're adding a point 1 on the top there. Note is that this permit has no force or effect until such time that Heritage Victoria issues a heritage permit for the development. And if I have a second, I'm happy to speak to it.
Is there a seconder? Yeah. Councillor Carly-Hannon. Councillor Farnley, do you want to speak to it?
Yes. Look, after extensive community consultation, this is perhaps one of the most popular planning applications that I've certainly asked residents about. They are very excited about the prospect of boutique shops and cinemas coming into the city of Moreland, where such doesn't exist at the moment whatsoever. In fact, me and my friends, if we want to watch a movie, we have to go to Broady or Northland or what it may be. But this is a really exciting particular location for this. Now, there's a few things that were raised, and the council officers have actually addressed a number of those concerns. Number one, within the council officer's recommendation, the previous plans had a wall that basically interfaced A division. Point 1A in the papers, or it will be 2A now, actually asks for an inclusion of commercial tenancy on the north or west elevation, or the northwest corner of the basement level to provide activation of this corner of the building. What that actually means is that rather than a wall being built by the applicant, it will be tenants small businesses that will face into that space between A division and the actual construction, creating a pedestrian walkway all around that particular precinct and all around A division to create a nice interface rather than you looking at a big wall in an A division. So a really nice piece of space for people to walk through. In regards to the shared road, I think we looked at a previous council briefing meeting where we looked at a road where you actually have that sort of zebra line marking across the road to create a safe space for cars to come in very slowly to park their car and pedestrians to walk around. So it'll be more of a piazza type of feel rather than a road. So I think that addresses that particular concern. But this is overall a highly popular application amongst the residents of Moreland. There are many residents that have bought into the Pentridge estate a decade ago, waiting for the cinemas and the shops to come in, and time and time again, unfortunately, it's been delayed. Not purely the council's issue, at times it was also the developer that went bankrupt, as I understand it. But we have to take ownership of the fact that it has been delayed by our mismanagement as well. And this is an opportunity for us to now take a look at a very good application that has good interface between the old and the new. In regards to the height, I think the height was concerned as an issue. This is a 2 to 4 story development. If this is an appropriate height, then I don't know what the potential application is for this particular precinct. In regards to the actual architecture, look, I'm not an architect, I'm not an expert in this space, but the old and the new contrasting, I think, will actually create a really interesting design element and something really interesting to take a look at. I think if we were to create a whole range of new blue stones, it really doesn't contrast well and create good design elements. So from a design perspective, it's actually going to be quite an interesting thing to look at. The reutilisation of A Division as a performance and arts hub and a few studios for some small businesses to come to is going to be really interesting interpretation and design, and I think that's a really good reutilisation of that building, and you really uses it really well. This is going to be a landmark for the City of Moreland. This is going to draw a number of tourists and create a number of jobs in the City of Moreland. People will want to go to the Palace Cinemas at Pentridge and watch a movie because that is the landmark location to watch a movie. The number of jobs it creates and the number of opportunities to engage our youth, to employ our youth, is fantastic. This is an application I think is really good and really deserves your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Carly-Hannon, do you wish to speak to the item?
I reserve my right to speak.
You can't reserve as a seconder, so you can speak during the debate or speak now.
I'll speak later on.
Okay. Any further speakers to this item? Yep, Councillor Bolton and then Councillor Kavanagh.
I was initially thinking this might be something like one of the developments in Pentridge that I could actually support, but I would like to see a change before I could actually support it. Now, I was advised that the change would be too substantial to be an amendment, because I was actually looking to do an amendment rather than a refusal. But because I've been advised that it would be too substantial, it means that I've got an alternative resolution for refusal. My main reason is that once, given that there are 2 cruciform buildings and one already has proposals for a lot of infill buildings, I think it's not too much to ask for this building to be shifted south, so that it is below the southern tip of the cruciform, so that people can, if there's going to be any kind of respect, if it is going to be any kind of landmark, as Councillor Farnley was talking about, it really needs to come away from that building so that you can actually walk right around the building, at the historic A Division, and see it in full, because once it's inbuilt, it's gone. That's it. You'll be able to see it from some perspectives, but not other perspectives. And it may very well be right, people might want to come to see films in this cinema. I'm sure people will. I probably will as well. But I don't think the two, the historic and the modern, need to clash as much. My main reason, there are a couple of other points, but I think the main thing is the setback, because once that vantage point is gone, it is gone forever. once it's built, it's not going to be pulled down. So, you know, I mean, I think this is probably one of the better developments in the Pentridge estate, but I think it's got a problem because it's nestled right up into that particular corner of the A division, and I think it needs to come away so that you can properly appreciate the building.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yes, I rise to support Councillor Farley's motion, and because we've been dealt out of the heritage aspects of the application. If we had that authority, then it might be different. But unfortunately, through no fault of our own, we don't have that authority. We can only deal with it on other planning grounds, and on those planning grounds, I believe it's worthy of support. Can I also just say that Councillor Farley mentioned about, I don't think anyone around the table questioned Councillor Farley's motivations at all. He deals with an application. If you think it's worthy of support, it's worthy of support. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I, for one, don't, and I don't think anyone around the table does, just to clarify that point from before. So for that reason, and I'm very much in the same boat, I'll make up my own mind on what I think. I think on this one, it's worthy of support.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I also rise to speak in favour of this application. And I just want to also highlight that it wasn't our mismanagement the reason why we deferred it last time. It was that we were waiting for that Heritage Victoria report, and it's unfortunate that it hasn't come before us. But for a lot of the reasons why, which Councillor Kavanagh just touched on, I think it's important that we press on with this. I would like to highlight with this building, and something that I really do like about this building, I encourage the developer to really look at all of their buildings that are coming into it. The ESD on this development, I think, is really high quality in the sense that it's got 112 kilowatts. It's looking at rainwater capture and feeding that into the system, you know. So looking at things, and I really encourage all developers to really look at this. We're heading in a direction where we need to take action on these things. We need to have a self-sustaining community. And one of the things that this building has is its high ESD credentials. And I really think that moving forward, other things that the developer might want to consider, including things like bulk buy renewable energy or embedded generation, which is what some of the other developers were talking about earlier. I think those things are really, really advantageous, and they really add, and they also assist us in making these decisions. So I highly emphasise those things throughout all the developments in the entire precinct. But yes, supportive of this one.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Cullihan, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, so I agree with many of the points raised by Councillor Farnley. And I guess a big factor that I've been considering is this kind of discussion. Even though we're not deciding on heritage per se, we are still thinking about it in terms of an urban planning perspective, how these interfaces work and how they're going to work for our residents and how they're going to be able to enjoy this space. So I actually think that the work that Shire Group's already done for the square, and the way that you can kind of already imagine how good this is going to be, to have, that commercial precinct but mixed in with, a piazza and these heritage sites where people will be able to enjoy this. And I think we have a lot of examples in Melbourne. If you look at walking through the RMIT buildings and a range of other, even Melbourne University, a range of other sites, you do really get that feel. I also think that a number of residents have touched on wanting that sort of European interpretation. And while I think that there's been a lot of failures for the overall side of Pentridge in trying to get something that really gives a great village feel, this is the best thing that our Pentridge residents are going to have, and it's going to be a great opportunity for them to really mingle as a community, and for the broader residents of Coburg and the North to sort of integrate into this space and provide a really great activity centre.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. Any further speakers on this item? No, in that case, I'll put Councillor Farnley's motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Vote be recorded.
Yes, so Councillor Bolton wishes for her vote to be recorded. No. I'll turn to the officer to outline the next steps.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. So the Urban Planning Committee have decided to alter the officer recommendation outlined in the agenda to include a condition that the permit will have no force or effect until Heritage Victoria issue a heritage permit. So a permit will now be granted on the basis of the conditions in the agenda and including that condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the people who came to make submissions for or against proposal and all the applicants and all the councillors for their participation tonight, and I declare the meeting closed.